What if everything you believed you understood about Jesus merely represents the concluding chapter of a remarkable spiritual odyssey that has unfolded over millennia? What if the individual who traversed the shores of Galilee existed not just once, but multiple times in history, with each incarnation equipping him for his destined purpose? Before you dismiss this as implausible, allow me to present information that will profoundly alter your perception of the greatest narrative ever recounted. If you've ever pondered the enigmas of reincarnation, spiritual growth, or felt an attraction to the more profound teachings regarding consciousness, be sure to subscribe and activate that notification bell. What I'm about to disclose is based on insights from one of America's most well-documented psychics, Edgar Cayce, and his remarkable readings that have been repeatedly validated between 1901 and 1944 from his residence in Virginia Beach. Edgar Cayce provided more than 14,000 verified psychic readings during profound trance sessions. However, what astonished even his most devoted followers was his revelation in several readings. Cayce stated that the soul recognized as Jesus had experienced at least 30 prior incarnations before his birth in Bethlehem. In this video, we will delve into 5 crucial lives that contributed to the consciousness evolving into Jesus the Christ. By the conclusion of this presentation, I assure you, your understanding of spiritual growth will transform entirely. The earliest incarnation brings us to the mythical land of Atlantis, dating back more than 100,000 years. In Cayce's reading 3644, it's noted that the soul of Christ initially emerged on Earth as an entity known as Emilius. However, this wasn't a physical presence in the way we typically conceive it. Rather, Emilius was characterized by Cayce as the primary manifestation of the divine mind, the Logos, existing in a spiritual body prior to souls adopting a physical form. Imagine this remarkable vision drawn from Cayce's trance insights. In Atlantis, humanity encountered its most significant crisis. The initial influx of souls, known as the sons of men in the Bible, had descended from higher dimensions and found themselves imprisoned in grotesque, half-animal forms due to their improper use of free will. These beings were not the aesthetically pleasing human forms we recognize today. Instead, they were bizarre hybrid entities born from souls that became ensnared by the material world too rapidly. This is where it becomes truly intriguing. Emilius, as noted by Cayce, emerged as the leader of the second wave of souls, referred to as the Sons of God, who willingly chose to descend and assist in liberating their trapped siblings. Rather than merely extracting them, Emilius undertook a groundbreaking initiative. He guided the course of human evolution, crafting the ideal physical structure for souls to inhabit, the human body as we recognize it today. Insights from 364.8 illustrate that Emilius essentially became the cosmic designer of human consciousness, establishing a spiritual framework that enabled souls to live in the physical realm while preserving their link to the divine. This is the reason Cayce often identified this entity as the first Adam, not just the biblical figure, but the foundational model for human spiritual growth. Now, here's something truly astonishing about the Atlantean era. I will soon share information that directly correlates with contemporary archaeological findings, seemingly supporting Cayce's extraordinary assertions. Before we dive deeper into these fascinating insights regarding Jesus's previous lives, I'd like to pose a question. Have you ever sensed that you were destined for something significant? Perhaps you've had moments where certain memories seemed just out of reach, or knowledge felt instinctively familiar despite never having been taught it. This could signify the awakening of your own soul memory. If this strikes a chord with you, please take a moment to like this video and share in the comments any extraordinary spiritual encounters you've experienced. According to Cayce's readings, following the downfall of Atlantis, the soul of Christ took on several incarnations as various biblical characters, with each subsequent life building upon the previous one. However, there is one particular incarnation that altered everything. And when I share the documented evidence backing this assertion, you'll be astonished. The soul that had been Emilius later appeared in the Bible as Enoch, the enigmatic patriarch who walked with God and did not experience death. In reading 2 Joe 6:7-11, Cayce disclosed that Enoch was Jesus in an earlier existence, acting as humanity's initial significant spiritual mentor. But here's where it gets truly remarkable. Enoch not only imparted spiritual wisdom, but also made a record of it. Cayce stated that Enoch was the creator of the very first written spiritual texts, forming the base for all subsequent religious doctrines. Interestingly, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1947, 2 years post Cayce's passing, they included significant excerpts from Enoch's writings, reinforcing Cayce's assertion that such texts were regarded as sacred by those who lived during Jesus' time. The New Testament's Jude, authored by Jesus' sibling, explicitly cites the Book of Enoch, referring to it as prophecy. How could Cayce have foreseen this link long before these ancient documents came to light? The synchronicity is remarkable, yet Enoch's purpose extended far beyond merely writing. As stated in reading 3:64-9, Enoch acted as a conduit between the spiritual realm and the physical world, guiding humanity on how to retain divine awareness while inhabiting physical forms. He was ultimately laying the groundwork for the Christ message centered on divine love and transcending material constraints. Here's what Cayce disclosed that will forever transform your perspective on spiritual evolution. Enoch did not simply vanish from the earth as the Bible indicates. Instead, his awareness elevated to what Cayce referred to as the throne chariot of divine consciousness. This became a model for the spiritual enlightenment that each soul could ultimately realize. This idea is closely linked to Jesus' later teachings regarding the kingdom of heaven residing within us. The very consciousness that had been Enoch was nurturing the spiritual principles that would lead to the message of Christ. However, there is an incarnation that connects the Old Testament figures with the arrival of Jesus, and it is sure to captivate you. Following that, we encounter one of the most enigmatic characters in biblical history, Melchizedek, the king priest of Salem, who bestowed a blessing upon Abraham with bread and wine. This is where Cayce's insights take on an almost prophetic quality. In reading 2067-11, Cayce disclosed that Melchizedek was, in a previous life, Jesus, fulfilling the roles of both king and priest during the era of Abraham. But wait for this remarkable detail. Cayce asserted that the Book of Job, a deep investigation into human pain and the nature of divine intent, was actually composed by Melchizedek. During his trance states, Cayce frequently recited particular excerpts from Job, stating that it was Melchizedek who recorded them, referred to as the Son of Man. In the New Testament, the book of Hebrews identifies Jesus as a high priest in the order of Melchizedek. However, many Christians have struggled to grasp the true significance of this statement. Cayce explained that it signifies Jesus was literally returning to fulfill the priestly role he had initiated as Melchizedek thousands of years prior. Here's something truly astonishing. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi codices uncovered that the Essenes, the spiritual community Cayce claimed Jesus was a part of, regarded Melchizedek as a celestial angelic being. This perception closely mirrored how Christians would later interpret the resurrected Christ, especially considering the bread and wine that Melchizedek offered to Abraham. Cayce indicated that this event marked the initiation of the First Communion, laying the groundwork for the sacred ritual Jesus would later implement during the Last Supper. Essentially, the same soul was establishing spiritual practices in one existence that would be realized in another. Yet, what I find particularly intriguing about the incarnation of Melchizedek is that Cayce disclosed this was the moment when the Christ soul mastered the art of harmonizing spiritual authority with modest service. Precisely the blend that would empower Jesus' ministry profoundly. According to reading 254:68, this soul, in the guise of Melchizedek, founded the school of the prophets, which later evolved into the Essene community, a place where Jesus would receive his education. Can you appreciate the remarkable thread of spiritual intent that weaves through these lifetimes? However, there is one incarnation that presents a completely different perspective on spiritual growth, and it centers around one of the most compelling narratives found in the Bible. The fourth significant incarnation brings us to ancient Egypt, where the Christ's soul existed as Joseph, the son of Jacob. Reading 294-189 uncovers a chilling insight into the intricacies of divine planning. The life story of Joseph serves primarily as a precursor to the mission of Jesus. Consider the remarkable similarities that Cayce highlighted. Joseph faced rejection from his own siblings, mirroring the way Jesus would be dismissed by his own nation. He was cast into a pit and abandoned, foreshadowing the death and burial of Jesus. Ultimately, Joseph ascended to the role of the savior of Egypt during a period of 7 years of famine. In the same way that Jesus became the spiritual redeemer in humanity's time of spiritual need, there is an important detail that indicates Cayce tapped into knowledge that transcends ordinary understanding. He disclosed that Joseph started serving Pharaoh at the age of 30, which is exactly the age at which Jesus initiated his ministry. The trajectories of their lives mirrored each other, featuring similar experiences of early rejection, a seeming death, a resurgence to prominence, and ultimately leading to the salvation of their people. In reading 2067:7, it is noted that Joseph's ability to interpret dreams was not merely a psychic talent. Rather, it was a form of divine awareness that would eventually enable Jesus to grasp the spiritual significance of earthly experiences. Joseph was essentially deciphering the symbolic language of the soul, yet there is an even deeper layer to consider. Cayce emphasized that Joseph's act of forgiving his brothers, who had sought to take his life, laid the spiritual foundation for Jesus' teachings on loving one's enemies and forgiving those who harm you. This same soul was undergoing a process over multiple lifetimes, learning to convert hatred into love through divine insight. According to reading 341:9, Joseph's effective leadership in Egypt during the years of famine was instrumental in preparing the Christ's soul for the ultimate test, guiding humanity out of spiritual hunger through the life-giving sustenance that Jesus would provide. Here's how this links directly to your own spiritual path. Every obstacle Joseph encountered in his life, every moment of hopelessness experienced in prison, and every urge to exploit his abilities for personal benefits rather than for service, contributed to the spiritual fortitude necessary for Jesus to withstand Satan's temptations in the desert and remain faithful to his mission, even to the point of dying on the cross. The connection is unmistakable. Each lifetime served as a learning environment where Christ's soul absorbed crucial lessons needed for the overarching goal of human salvation. However, the last incarnation prior to Jesus might spark the most debate, unveiling insights about spiritual growth that could transform your understanding of how souls evolve. The fifth manifestation introduces us to Joshua, the leader who guided the Israelites into the Promised Land following the death of Moses. This aspect often raises eyebrows, as Joshua is primarily associated with military victories, which appears to contradict Jesus' teachings of love and peace. However, there's a revelation from Cayce in reading 2724 that can significantly reshape your viewpoint. Joshua's function was not mainly that of a warrior, but rather as a spiritual recorder and psychic conduit for Moses. Cayce suggests that a considerable portion of what we credit to Moses was, in fact, received and documented by Joshua via spiritual dictation. This clarifies one of the significant enigmas of the Bible. How is it possible that Moses wrote about his own death in Deuteronomy? As Cayce suggests, it was Joshua who finished Moses' texts after acquiring knowledge through a psychic connection with the consciousness of the late prophet. However, there is a more profound spiritual insight here. Analyzing 294.189 shows that Joshua's military endeavors symbolize the soul's struggle against material temptations and a lower state of consciousness. The adversaries that Joshua triumphed over in the Promised Land symbolized the detrimental thought patterns and self-centered impulses that hinder our entry into our own spiritual Promised Land. Each victory that Joshua achieved through faith and divine direction was a preparation for the Christ consciousness, gearing up for the ultimate spiritual confrontation that Jesus would face, not against human foes, but against the forces of ignorance, fear, and spiritual despair that keep humanity apart from divine love. As noted by Cayce, Joshua's complete adherence to divine instruction, even when it seemed illogical, was cultivating the spiritual surrender essential for Jesus to proclaim, "Not my will, but thine be done," in the Garden of Gethsemane. According to reading 2067:11, Joshua's task of organizing the 12 tribes into their respective territories served as training for Jesus' mission with the 12 disciples, each of whom embodied a distinct facet of human consciousness that needed to align with divine will. Yet what is truly remarkable about the incarnation of Joshua is this. Cayce disclosed that this lifetime instructed the soul of Christ on how to embody both the gentleness of a dove and the wisdom of a serpent. It demonstrated how to possess profound compassion for human frailty while steadfastly upholding spiritual truths. The challenges faced by Joshua in the external realm were shaping Jesus to confront internal struggles, battling against the temptation to exploit spiritual power for personal benefit, grappling with moments of doubt regarding his purpose, and contending with the human instinct to evade the suffering that divine love often demands. Now, here's what unites these 5 incarnations into an extraordinary narrative of spiritual growth that could transform your perception of your own soul's path. When examining these 5 lives, Amelia S. in Atlantis, Enoch the scribe, Melchizedek the priest-king, Joseph the dream interpreter, and Joshua the spiritual warrior, we observe a flawless syllabus of spiritual learning. Each incarnation cultivated distinct traits that were crucial for the mission of Jesus. From Amelia, Christ's soul acquired the understanding of cosmic duty, learning how to steer the spiritual growth of all humanity, rather than merely focusing on individual progress. Enoch taught him the art of converting divine wisdom into human language that could be retained and shared throughout generations. From Melchizedek, he gained insight into balancing spiritual leadership with humble service, embodying both king and priest roles. Joseph imparted the lesson of turning personal pain into widespread empathy and the ability to forgive even the most egregious offenses. Joshua demonstrated how to uphold unwavering obedience to divine will, despite the surrounding earthly turmoil. According to reading 574914, these weren't just arbitrary incarnations. Instead, they formed a thoughtfully crafted spiritual curriculum, where each lifetime added to the lessons learned from the preceding ones. The soul destined to be Jesus was genuinely experiencing what Cayce referred to as the University of Human Experience, gearing up for the most significant spiritual endeavor in human history. So what does this mean for your current life? Cayce suggests that every soul undergoes comparable developmental patterns over several lifetimes. The obstacles you encounter, the talents you're nurturing, and the connections you're mending, all these elements contribute to your personal spiritual education, equipping you for the specific mission your soul is meant to fulfill. The reading 281-37 indicates that numerous souls from ancient times, who collaborated with the incarnations of Christ's Spirit, are now being reborn in America and globally, reunited to assist in creating what Cayce referred to as the new era of spiritual enlightenment. This might explain why this information strikes such a profound chord with you. Perhaps you were part of that experience. In Atlantis, ancient Egypt, or biblical Palestine, you learned alongside the being who would later become Jesus, and now you find yourself here again, prepared to apply those timeless teachings to contemporary spiritual hurdles. The insights that Cayce uncovered through these readings go beyond Jesus's personal growth. They illustrate the evolution of consciousness itself, showcasing how love improves its expression through experience and how souls gain strength and wisdom from each challenge encountered. Whether you view these past lives as actual events or as significant spiritual allegories, the core message remains evident. Every life carries inherent sacredness, every experience holds meaning, and every soul embarks on a journey toward the same ultimate goal that Jesus attained: the perfect manifestation of love through human awareness. As indicated in reading 262-49, the Christ consciousness cultivated through these lifetimes represents not just a historical feat, but serves as a blueprint for human spiritual potential, the aspiration toward which all souls are progressing. The same divine love that was refined through the experiences of illustrious figures like Enoch, Melchizedek, Joseph, and Joshua is the very love that seeks to awaken within your heart at this moment. Thus, engaging with these spiritual teachings goes beyond merely comprehending the past. It serves to hasten your own spiritual evolution in this lifetime. Every trait cultivated through these ancient lifetimes, cosmic duty, divine insight, humble service, transformative compassion, and perfect adherence to love, are the same attributes that can turn your life into a blessing for all those you encounter. If this remarkable exploration of Edgar Cayce's insights regarding Jesus's past lives has sparked new possibilities for you about spiritual growth and reincarnation, take a moment to share this video with someone who may benefit from this message. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you stay updated on our future videos discussing Edgar Cayce's extraordinary spiritual insights, including his forecasts about America's spiritual destiny and the coming era of enlightenment. I'd love to hear in the comments which of these 5 versions resonated with you the most and why. Perhaps your soul is recalling something significant about its own ancient path toward divine love,